are like me. You have moved from a time of preparation for eating, preparation for napping, preparation for the rush of Thanksgiving that feels a little different this year and moves into a spirit of preparation for December holidays. We celebrate Christmas in our house, so we have been busily putting up greenery and hanging lights and thinking about what trees we might get to help decorate our home. We've been eating a lot of leftovers and we've been watching a lot of holiday movies on the Netflix. And I have been delighted by watching some of the newer movies, not just the classics. Delighted at the representation that's on my TV screen these days. When I watch the old classic holiday movies, I see a lot of European American folks with great stories that does not speak to the whole condition of humanity. But these days, when I turn on my TV, I got to watch a show with KP called Dash and Lily. It's a holiday based story that features an incredibly diverse cast, an incredibly diverse emotional experience, and an incredibly diverse faith statement. It is a feel good story, and you watch it and it sucks you in. And I could not stop smiling. It takes place in New York City, and it's about two young teenagers trying to find their way in the world. And it is a love letter to the city and to the world, to the sights and sounds, the tastes, the food, the various kinds of people. The guys that are statues in Central Park are featured. There's an incredible drag queen. There's the Strand bookstore. There's the carriage rides and an underground musical concert featuring hardcore Jewish music they call Jew core. There's a Japanese American young woman who is the lead. And there's this message about the magic of representation and the diversity that is in America, that is in our world. And it also pushes back with the few European American characters on the ideas of toxic masculinity and the ideas of trying to grow up in a world that does not value you for who you are. It embraces the weird and the different, and it showcases this full spectrum of humanity that I fell in love with. The message of our interdependence on one another, and the message that when we are more diverse, we are made more whole, is one that I think we need to hear these days. And I was especially struck by the faith statements underneath the current of the show. It's a 10 episode series. You can fly right through it if you're a binge watcher like I am. I was struck by not just the Christmas themes and the usual holiday movie themes that lift up hope, faith, belief, magic, miracles. And it does have this focus on faith, but it also has a deeper theological statement that this love story about Dash and Lily, these two characters, is also a faith story. Because Dash and Lily, they differ not just in the way that they were raised and in their ethnicities, in their kind of beliefs, right? And not just about the wonder of Christmas. Lily is in love with Christmas and thinks it is the best thing ever. Dash is a little bit of a bah humbug character in the beginning of the show. But they learn about how their different beliefs intermingle and change, and they grow stronger as humans and as characters and in their relationship throughout the show. They learn from one another and they are grounded by one another. And the end of the season, I won't spoil what happens between Dash and Lily for you, but the end of the season showcases what happens after Christmas, and it culminates in Lily's Japanese heritage showing up with the New Year ceremony for her Shinto grandfather and her family. They go to the temple and they prepare for the new year, the season of preparation. And the grandfather brings out the Otashi Dama cards. It's a ritual in Japan of kind of like New Year's cards, well wishes, looking back on the old year and making promises and best wishes for the new year. And there's often a gift of money that goes along to the young kids. So for our kids watching, if you have any inclination of learning about Japanese history or culture, I invite you to look up Otashi Dami and see what you can work your parents for. It's a celebration, it's honoring one another. And as we move towards the end of the year in our world, this year that we'd probably rather forget, most of us, I was struck by what we might learn about this ritual from a TV show on Netflix. And I wonder what we might learn about healing the wounds of the past 9 months by looking back on it and figuring out how we might give money, gifts, talents back to help heal the world, to help heal this continent from 400 years of colonialism. To see these Shinto rituals and the connection between Lily, her heritage, her love for New York and for Christmas, and for the small, beautiful moments of praying in temples and being with family. It got me thinking about how do we connect all of this with our world? And if you don't know much about Shintoism, it's a very nature-based religion. And the relation to the environment of practitioners from Japan and all over the world relates to the witnessing of spiritual beings known as kami, not just in people or in animals, but in everything. That there are spiritual beings or spiritual beingness in everything. And this reverence for the earth and for nature, I really felt resonance with. So I picked up a book called Shinto Meditations for Revering the Earth by Stuart Picken. This is what he writes. Shinto, by contrast, seemed self-evident to its first followers. Wherever they looked, they saw mystery. They confronted it in surging rivers, giant rocks, and pounding waterfalls. They saw it high above in the sun, the moon, and the stars. Before they had discovered how to read and write, they spoke of nature's mysteries as kami, that which inspire awe and wonder. There were kami in everything, and anything could be kami. It was a universe pervaded by the divine, an environment in which the divine and human were in constant communion, a sacred universe in which the material and the spiritual were inextricably united, where humans and divinities coexisted. That there is a spirituality to everything. That not just every being is sacred, but every mountain, every tree, every bug, every blade of grass. In a time when we are asked to stay at home as much as possible, we did that mindfulness of the nature around us, to feel that gratitude for what we do have access to be grateful for the small graces of breath, of air, rain, wind, sunlight, moonlight, a Christmas tree, if you do that in your house, the taste of sweet foods, if you do that. What must it be like to recognize the sacredness and the saltiness of the pretzel, the sacredness of the plants that form our salads, the kami that becomes the chocolate in our hot cocoa? It's been a good reminder to me for this year, in a year that I'd rather forget, that there is holiness everywhere, that it is all good. And exploring the Shinto mythology of where the kami come from, where the sense of spirituality comes from, there is a story of the origins of life and the universe that uses two primordial figures, kind of like an Adam and Eve. One gives birth to the multitude of the kami, but dies delivering the last one. And she has to descend to the place of death, referred to literally as the land of the pollution. And so the male figure goes to the land of pollution to try and save his love. And at first, she refuses to leave, and she orders him out. She's now in the place of death, so she has power over death, and she threatens to kill 1,000 people a day if he remains trying to save her. And he comes from the land of life and counters, well, then I will give birth to 500 more than you have killed every day. Expresses the Shinto belief in the power of life over death and in the cycle of our seasons, that spring comes again throughout the winter, that the hope for the new year always rings loud. Creation over destruction, renewal over decay, healing over sickness. And then finally, with his efforts in vain, he returns home back to the land of the living and begins to wash the impurities of the pollution from his body. This is where Shinto religion gets the purification rituals that are seen as an ongoing process of restoration. It's still practiced in various forms, and it calls for restoration not just of the body or of the soul, but of everything. That everything can be purified, renewed, healed. Cultures, countries, histories, heritages. And it's based on the belief that it helps not just change ourselves by doing these rituals, but it also helps change the outside world. That in the outside world where everything is holy, the underlying principle is one of balance and harmony. That the great trinity of Shintoism is the kami of the sun, of the moon, and of the sea and stars, and that they're all working together interactively, not against one another. It's different from Western traditions, where we talk about subduing the land of gods being in power over one another. That's not how it works in Shintoism. That the constant interactions of these three forces is where the extraordinary power and diversity of nature comes from, where the beauty of the kami and the spirituality of everything is based on this balance and harmony. Not that the three are the same, they're all quite different, but it is that diversity and unity that gives it its splendor. What Shinto folks call great nature. Why am I telling you this? Because I think it's interesting, and in the similarity of how we can't just seem to focus on one kind of justice work, as Sandy was talking about, as a congregation, because it's all intersectional and interconnected and interwoven. And when you pull on one string, the rest shake. I find the resonance between these stories of how our powers work best in harmony and not in opposition. When we all take our individual gifts and talents and we harness them collectively, just like the kami of great nature, just like the characters on this Netflix show, that the balance and harmony of diverse representation, where we're not all trying to do the same thing, where it's not all one ethnicity dominating the screen and singing songs like White Christmas. Just like these things, our principles are not meant to be separate and separated, but are meant to be intertwined. It's given me a lot of thought. And of course, this time when I am preparing for the Christian tradition of Advent and then Christmas gives me pause to think about how the idea of domination and oppression can become part of a religious story, of a faith story. And it happened with Shintoism as well during World War II. The Japanese Empire strayed away from what was called true Shinto to create what is now known as false Shinto. And it was copying the Christian ideas, the Western ideas of domination and empire building as a way of perverting the truth of that religion away from balance and harmony and towards imbalance and power hoarding. It makes me think that, yeah, representation matters. That really learning from one another matters. And when we just try to copy what we have seen in other places because it gives us a sense of power, false justice, when we're just copying those stories rather than being ourselves, as Lily and Dash learn, when we're trying to be something that we're not, we miss out on the magic all around us and within us. When we learn to believe in ourselves as unique and beloved souls, some might use the word kami, when we are looking for harmonious connection and not trying to outdo one another or be more than one another, my friends, that is preaching the good news. That is the good news according to Netflix or Netflix metaphors. I'm struck by how when I watch these diverse stories that I catch some of the lessons that are hidden underneath. Stuff that's not shouted, but if you listen closely, you might hear it. Teachings that show us what what Shintoism teaches, how to purify ourselves in the world, how to renew all life, because the spirit of the divine is everywhere and is one of harmony and not domination, is one of balance and representation, not just for different kinds of people, not just for different kinds of belief systems, not just for different kinds of inclinations towards justice, but all of it. That we are all in need of these rituals of transformation, purification, preparation for a new year, and that the great message of hope and belief in these times of twinkling lights and greenery and songs. Another version of this story is that this is not a message from God, but is a way in which people can attune themselves to the message of nature, to our environment, to our world. And by doing that, by paying attention to the outside, thinking about the birds, the trees, the dew, the snow, the rain, the wind, by that means, seek out the divine. Just like our movies and our TV shows, our congregation, our justice work is made better by diverse representation. Knowing that it's all interconnected, environmental, racial, mass incarceration, anti-violence, economic, educational. It is all interconnected, just like our 8 principles and just like the fabric of our congregation. That when we believe and learn to believe in ourselves, not in spite of our differences, but because of our differences, believing in your own brand of magic, you might see things in this new way, in this holy way. Diverse representation, that the more we see each other, the more we respect each other. That being yourself and showing yourself while seeing others and respecting others is a religious statement. And it helps fuel the healing of this world through the justice work that we do. Friends, I invite you to watch some of these shows to lean into that representation and to try and see holiness everywhere, to engage in the work that Sandy has called us to, because it is all interconnected. And that inside and out, the best way to heal our body and our soul is to heal the world in body and soul as well. And to learn that we cannot do it alone, that we are made stronger together and we need each other. May it be so. Amen.